Hello, my friends in costuming and dance, and welcome to another coffee chat. Although I left my coffee in the other room, no worries. We're going to be talking about costume from the hip. Now, let's get real. This is the book that put me on the map and sort of changed the direction and scope of my entire life. I owe so much to this book, but it didn't always look like this. Back in 1993, when I wrote my first copy, it looked more like this. When we released it, it was a 78-page book with a comb binding. This happens to be the second edition, which was revised and expanded up to 114 pages. And the reason why we revised and expanded it was because I was getting feedback and improving the book. So this dates from 1995. So it was originally published in 93. This is one of the earliest copies I have from 95. Somewhere around this house in one of my archives is one of the original 73-page version. And if you have been following me for many years, maybe you have one of those too. It evolved. So at some point in time, we went from printing it at home. We had our covers commercially printed. We included a plastic coating. I mean, why? Why did I do that? And we were doing it ourselves. We had a comb binder. We were making this product in-house, printing and punching every single one. The only thing we had commercially printed were the covers. So these covers on this nicer paper were printed, and then this all came off of a laser printer that we had in the back room. A few years down the road, in like 2002, we switched over to a comb binding system. We switched over from a comb binding to this wire O. So I was doing this myself. In fact, anybody who saw me in the year 2000 to 2004, you might have seen me sitting at an event like Rakasa or Desert Dance Festival, literally punching and binding these. I was doing so much work, I got real arm workout. And so the book stayed this way until there were changes in the publishing industry that led to print on demand. And so when we got to the print on demand era, roughly 2009, 2010, we switched to this size, and we also did a few more very minimal changes. So you can see this is the 8x10 size. All my books are produced in this size so that when they sit on a bookcase, you can see they're all the same size. And each book has a different color. So if you have 6 of my books, you have 6 different colored spines. I drew this illustration, but the book cover was colored by a graphic designer for me. And this is what you can download from Amazon. If you buy a book, print on demand, this is what you'll get. However, we are rewriting this book. This book is getting a total revamp and will be twice this size. Look at this 115-page book is going to be more like 200 pages because I'm integrating content from other publications like Style File. So the content from this out-of-print booklet is going to get in there, as well as other sources, other things I've written over the years. Okay, so that's just the story, a little backstory. Now, people have asked me what inspired my journey. So I thought I would take a minute today to show you the books. Hello, Silver. Goodbye, Silver. Show you the books that were inspirational to me back in the late 90s. I went to fashion school. I went to Sarah College in San Diego. And this is one of my first influences. This is Doreen Yarwood's epic tome, World Costume, the Encyclopedia of World Costume. So it's set up encyclopedia style. And I was very interested in learning how to draw for my future life as a theatrical costumer, a path that I didn't choose to pursue. I didn't want to travel that much, right? I wanted to be grounded, and theater is all about travel. But this particular book was my Bible and reference, and it is the book that informed the style of many of the illustrations in Costume from the Hip. This particular book, although it is not about Middle Eastern costuming at all, it's mostly Western, but I knew that I could draw at this level, and it gave me the inspiration to improve my drawing skills, my fashion illustration skills, so that I could make a book that was text and images. Now, this is just an informational history book. I wanted to do this for the belly dance world, all right? But this is an amazing book, and this was incidentally published in 1986. So I got this while I was in fashion school. It's one of the few books that has been kicking around with me for the last 30 years. Another book, and please, I encourage you to laugh at it, that really inspired Costume from the Hip was decorative dressmaking. Of course, you can tell it was written and published in the 80s. Look at that outfit. Nothing says 80s like shoulder pad and a midi-length pleated skirt, right? Yeah, with stripes. Totally. So what made this book inspiring to me is that it had these wonderful oh wow, I turned to the page from the cover. It has these wonderful illustrations, again matched with text, but this had a combination of flats, so this is called a flat, and three-dimensional illustrations. And I was like, well, you know, if she could get away with this, do you see this? I think I want to do this too inside of my, you know, future belly dance costuming book. So this book's format and style, again, not about belly dance costume at all. It had photographs. Initially, photographs are very expensive to put into self-published books. But this had a lot of combination of like 3D pattern layouts, step-by-step instructions. I really wanted to get this kind of vibe going, you know, with different kinds of instructions, illustrations, and yeah, very inspiring to me. Look at these coats. Look at these coats. Oh my gosh. So decorative dressmaking also inspired the way Costume from the Hip looked. Now, of course, I was doing belly dance. So one of the few books that you could get back in the day was Cut My Coat. Let me see if I can find the publishing date. I think it's in the back. Yeah, this was published from the Royal Ontario Museum in 1973, and it was republished and republished, and I think you could still get this. And what it had were these fabulous flats and pattern blow-ups. So I wanted to take and do something like this as well. I wanted to integrate this look where you have the garment and then the layout of the pattern on fabric. So this is very intriguing to me, and this is something that really inspired me and that I wanted to include. You know, I wanted to have caftans and robes and thobes and all kinds of different kinds of more ethnographic, isn't this beautiful? This beautiful Coptic Christian 4th century. Just love it. I wanted to include a lot of more authentic regional costuming styles because I knew a lot of folk dancers. In San Diego, there was a large folk dancing group, and there was much crossover between the belly dance community and folk dancing. So I wanted to make sure I included this. And then there were the belly dance books. There were many belly dance books produced during the 70s. I did a kind of a talk about that in a previous video. And Marta Schill's book, The Complete Dancer, actually had a great chapter in the back about costuming. In the putting it all together section, the making of dance. And so from page 131, here, I'm just going to do a little flip through here. From page 131 to the end of the book, yeah, this book is cracking. This book is damaged. I actually have 2 other copies of this. I'm going to be cutting off that old binding and ring binding it because the glue is actually coming undone. So here are the illustrations from this book. And so there are very rudimentary, but, you know, very well done directions for how to turn a standard bra into a belly dance bra, how to make a belt, which at the time in the 70s we called a girdle. Language has changed, language evolves. We now call it a belt or a hip sash. And then there is two basic skirts, a straight skirt and a panel gored half circle skirt. So you can see that 70s vibe there with a whole lot of skin showing. And here are some classic harem pants, easy to do, showing how the length can be pulled up. The transparency in this illustration is so yummy to me. And, an ethnic, this is called the ethnic bathrobe. Yeah, we would call this a belly dress or a kaftan or the ethnic bathrobe cracks me up. But look at how beautiful this illustration is. Look at this. Look at this. And if you know how to sew, you can look at this and go, I see how that was made. But that was it. So I was inspired to make more content about costuming because on the one hand, I was a semi-professional belly dancer, right? I was like B grade, I did substitutions and danced in troops with my instructor and, would occasionally get called to dance a little bit, but I was definitely in that semi-pro level where I occasionally got paid but wasn't making a living out of it. And on the other hand, I was in college, I was studying fashion design, and I was making a living doing costuming. And while I was working on this book, my primary mode was Victorian costuming, especially ball gowns and living in dresses for doing living history. So I did a lot of Victorian costuming. But this book, I just wanted to provide more than this book. So inspiring. Now, Marta Schill wanted to do more than this book as well because she came up with a sequel called A Sequel. I don't know if you can read this. It's very shiny. I call this the copper book because it's really hard to see. Oh, hey, here we go. So also by Marta Schill. And The Finishing Touch, right? And this was purchased used and came with some old gold, like little souvenirs that I've left in here. But this book talks about putting together routines, like using the egg step walk. All right, yeah. And it's got sort of your old school foot things. You see, look at this. Yeah. And then when you come back here, you get into more costuming. So they talk about skirts, flamenco, gypsy. The flamenco looks like this apparently. Now, again, remember, in order to communicate with your students, you sometimes have to make up things. So would you call this the flamenco? Maybe not. I wouldn't do that, but she did. And that way she could communicate effectively. So when you go, oh, belly dance vernacular, belly dance language is so different, it's because there was no language to describe a belly dance costume style. So in order to communicate, you make one up. And here's the cabaret tuck. Yeah. And here is some wraps that you can do with your veil. And so look at that. And yeah, adding to your costumery with all kinds of things. And then what I love here is she mentions a suit. That's my personal passion. So she mentions a suit in this book. And and talks about makeup, cosmetic illusion, and attaching the wig, things that were needed. And then it goes into other things like putting together a full dance, some guidelines for the professional dancer. Remember, Marta Schill was one of the founders of MECTA, the Middle Eastern Culture and Dance Association, which was founded to be sort of a body that would help dancers get fair wages and develop some uniformity of codes and hold events and workshops so that dancers could get good training. So in the Los Angeles area, MECTA was a huge thing up until into this, this century, so through the 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s. It wasn't until, later that they, wound up disbanding. But Isn't this lovely book? This is the copper book. Very rare and hard to find, but if you get a copy, such a delight. Now, why is it copper, you might ask? Well, I think there was a thing for metal dance books because this is the big kahuna. This is the belly dance costume book by Zarifa Aradun from the San Francisco Bay Area. And this particular book was sort of what I really wanted to modernize and update. I didn't get this book until, right before I did Costuming from the Hip. Costuming from the Hip started off as a series of handouts in classes. This book told me, hey, if I make a book, maybe somebody will buy it. I bought it, right? And I'm my own customer. So this particular book has so much good stuff in it, from patterns for belts. I'm going backwards to the front here. So belt patterns and designs. I meant to say girdle patterns. Remember, language has changed. There's, some clip art. There were some illustrations of jewelry and embellishments and skirts. Basically everything that you could want was in this book. This book is a treasure, and it includes a lot of things that maybe I wouldn't necessarily have included. And it's lovely, and it's got wonderful directions that work. And her costuming was, but it's of its date. It's of its period. So there's things in here that you might not do today from a construction point of view, but the design information is pretty amazing. But it definitely has that 1970s vibe. I love it. I just love it. Right. And here's here's a photograph from coins that you can get from Costless Imports in Berkeley. Again, I wanted to make sure that when I was writing my book that I included sources, because I had seen it in this book. So the first Costuming from the Hip had all kinds of sources, most of which are now out of business. There won't be sources like this. The Union Novelty Company, I'm sure this was, someplace important in 1972. Not necessarily a place you can shop at today. So in order to keep your book timeless, and we use the phrase evergreen now, you've got to not include that information. So but this kind of chart where you talk about the fabric, you look at this, she put prices in here for yardage. Polyester chiffon was about $3 a yard in 1972, whereas nylon chiffon was even cheaper at $1.50. So, so it's that's the kind of stuff that doesn't age well in a book. So that kind of thing is going to not be included in my next copy of Costuming from the Hip. And look at this. Isn't this lovely? All the tools and supplies you will need. I just think this is a charming illustration. And wow, look at that. A rhinestone setter. Nowadays, we primarily use glue or hand sewing. But, there was a day when you would punch the rhinestone fittings, the claw-based fittings. You would put those in, kind of like setting a rivet or an eyelet. And here's her croquis. Look at this. That's her croquis. Isn't she delightful? And she included two. So if you wanted to draw two pictures, you had the option. Yeah, it's just wonderful. She has some vintage pictures from the Chicago World's Fair. These are lovely. And I love the vintage artwork too. Jerome. And this book just completely inspired me. So I would talk to people about this book and nobody had seen it. So it was important to me to kind of make something that I felt was of a comparable quality for the modern day. Modern meaning 1993. So these are the books that inspired my journey, which began with Costuming from the Hip. the new costuming from the hip is going to be, you know, somewhere in the middle of all of these. And of course, I've evolved as an illustrator and as a costume maker. So the directions are going to become more intricate and more complete. The projects will be a mix of my 3 levels, you know, the down and dirty, the semi-pro or lifestyler level, and professional quality. And I'm going to break those 3 up. So when I'm talking about any one type of costuming, I am going to be able to say, well, this is the way I would do it if I was on a budget, both time and money. This is how I would do it if I had more time. And this is how I would do it if I had more money, because those things matter. And that's something that's not addressed in any of these kinds of publications. So yeah, these are the books. So just to recap, The Encyclopedia of World Costume by Doreen Yarwood. We have Cut of My Coat by Dorothy Burnham, right? Very slender volume, wonderful book. Decorative Dressmaking. Yes, you do not need to buy this book. Yes, it is very out of date, but I save it because it inspired my career. We have The Complete Belly Dancer and its sequel by Marta Schill, and this is easy to find because this was a mass market paperback. This was self-published, harder to find. But if you can get a copy, it's fun. And of course, The Big Kahuna, the belly dance costume book. I'm going to be giving all of these books a flip through this week, just to revisit my origin story, and to see if there's stuff in here that maybe I can update, modernize, and include in the new and expanded 30-year anniversary Costuming from the Hip. Well, I hope you found this interesting and maybe a little bit informative. I look forward to spending the rest of the year working on this book. Progress is being made, and next month we will have another update. Throughout the month of April, I'm working on a Purple A Suit 3-piece ensemble, and there will be information about it in my Facebook group. Here on the $7 level, the sewing level, I'm going to be doing videos about that project. And yeah, so watch out for it. If you have any ideas for what you would want to see in Costume from the Hip, you can put them in the comments below. Or if you want them to stay just between you and me, you can DM me with any ideas, comments, wishes. I'm in the process of writing this book, and maybe your idea will make it into the next volume. Anyways, I hope you have a great day. Remember to dance and costume well, and until the next time, have a wonderful time. Take care. Bye.